Member and Vice Chairman, IASB, CA D. Prasanna Kumar, and the Chairman of the Internal Audit Standard Board, CA Charanjot Singh Nanda. My colleagues in the Managing Committee, past chairmen of the branch, senior members of the profession, and members present today through virtual and physical mode. A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all for today's seminar on mentoring SMP's internal audit. It's been a privilege to Visakhapatnam branch to host the program on the mentoring SMP's internal audit, both in physical as well as virtual mode, which is organized by Internal Audit Standard Board of ICA. The topics are very well chosen for the benefit of the fraternity, like the fraud risk exposure should be assessed periodically, prevention techniques to avoid potential key fraud detection techniques, and reporting process plays a very vital role. Today, we have with us Mr. Manoj Agarwal, Head of Internal Audit, Metro Brands Limited, to deliberate on the topic, Safe to Start, Leveraging Internal Audit in Fraud Risk Management, and what SMPs can do to improve the value addition or cost reduction. What are the major snags will be enlightened by CA Deepji Singhal. And every retailer or manufacturer or service provider needs an efficient method to manage purchasing cash flow, build vendor relationship, and maximize buying power. One of the most practical and powerful ways to optimize the P2P process and build a better bottom line is the development of strong procurement of pay process. It will be deliberated by CA. I hope that today's deliberations will definitely benefit our fraternity while doing their assignments in the role of internal auditors and give more value addition in satisfying the expectations of the stakeholders. I once again thank the Internal Audit Standard Board, ICI, for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
May I now request the Vice Chairman of Visakhapatnam Branch of CRSF ICE, Sri Murali Krishna, to introduce the speakers. Dignitaries on the dais, my dear members who have attended physically for today's meeting and virtually attending the members of this seminar, very good evening to you all. I take this privilege to introduce the speakers of today's session. Mr. Manoj Agarwal, Head of Internal Audit, Metro Brands Limited, is the first speaker. He will be delivering on internal audit in process management. Manoj Agarwal is a leading internal audit and risk management department of Metro Brands Limited. He has over 22 years of experience delivering assurance and advisory services to management in retail, facility management, BFSI, manufacturing industry. He has aligned internal audit department with professional standards and management expectations. Prior to joining Metro Brands Limited, he was heading internal audit and risk management of Indian operations of ISS, AS, and was leader of information technology and information technology enabled services industry vertical for KNB Consulting. He currently is a member of International Internal Audit Standards Board of Institute of Internal Audits, USA. Manoj writes blog on risk and control, which is available on LinkedIn and www.toolsforgovernance.com. His blogs are published by ISACA and IIA. He is a fellow chartered accountant, diploma in information systems audit, visa from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, certified internal auditor, and certification in risk management assurance CRMA from Institute of Internal Auditors, USA. Certified information system auditor, CISA from ISACA, USA. With this brief introduction, I introduce the speaker of first technical session of today's seminar. The second technical session speaker, CA Deepji Singhal. He is delivering his lecture on cost reduction by SMPs, value addition and cost reduction by SMPs. Deepji Singhal has graduated in science from Bombay University with major subject being chemistry. He went to complete his chartered accountancy and presently is a fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He is also a certified internal auditor IIA, INC, Florida, USA. He is a certified ERA trainer for enterprise risk assessor from Methodway Limited, New Zealand. He has undergone training at Drucker Institute, Claremont Graduate University, USA, and is an accredited trainer for Drucker Curriculum Management Programs. He was World President Leadership Council Peter Drucker Society for the year 2011. He has been involved in setting up of risk management mechanism, reviewing and setting up of internal control structures, internal services, and business consultancy on design, documentation, and implementation of systems and procedures. He has introduced risk-based internal audit practices in organizations and led the process of introduction of risk management practices in organizations. He has been associated with various assignments on internal control reviews using COSO, COVID, compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements and professional practice standards of IIA, INC, Florida, USA. He has been a facilitator for workshop using control self-assessment technique. He is recently advising organizations for internal control implementation to satisfy SOX requirement and Class 49 requirements for listing in India. He speaks and trains regularly at professional forums of ICAI, ICWAI, IIA, ISSA, and meets of major corporates on various professional subjects like business risk management, internal control, control self-assessment, corporate governance, COVID, and CAATs. He was one of the workshop leaders in programs on COVID at Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He is a regular guest faculty at IIM Bangalore on risk management and internal controls. He has conducted workshops on business risk management and internal controls for CIA Center of Excellence in 2002-2003, and recently in organizations in India and Gulf region. With this brief introduction, I introduce the second technical session speaker, CA Deepji Singhal, to the address gathering. Now I request the treasurer, CA Prashant Kumar Panda, to introduce the third technical session speaker.
Good evening all. Jitendra is a qualified chartered accountant with more than 8 years post-qualification experience in internal audits, risk assessment, process improvement, internal controls, ERM, and preparation of standards operation practices. CA Jitendra has extensively worked with the leading power distribution and generation company of India. He has also worked on one of the leading renewable power company. He has also experience in carrying out process review and providing process improvement for various other sectors such as manufacturing, textile, engineering, retail, chemical, and pharmaceuticals. With these few words, I'm happy to introduce CA Jitendra to the August gathering. Thank you very much.
I am CA Prasanna Kumar D, the Vice Chairman of Internal Standards Board and also the past Chairman of the Visakhapatnam branch of SARCF ICA. I have proud privilege to welcome you all for today's webinar in the series of empowering SMPs in internal audit. Friends, we have with us our Honorable Chairman of Internal Standards Board, CA Charanjot Nanda. I call him my brother. He is with me. So I at the outset, I welcome you to Visakhapatnam. He has got special love for Visakhapatnam. Not only in his capacity as the chairman of Internal Standard Boards, even otherwise, there are many occasions where he has addressed our members. Most sought after speaker in various forums, be it in encouraging the young members and also giving enrichment to the and skill development for the senior members of the profession. And his heart is very close to members in practice, particularly small and medium practitioners across the country. He is one Central Council member, one of the Central Council members today, where he has visited almost every local corner of the entire country, control all the 5 regions of the ICI. CS Nanda, looking at the spark in him, he is the president. When he first entered the council, there the first time it has been Internal Standards Board has been constituted. He was the founder chairman of Internal Standards Board. And IASB has traveled so far. The long journey has taken place. Today, we have many international standards have been pronounced, which are recommended in nature. And very soon, I am sure, with the permission of with the approval of the council, they are going to be made mandatory. And that will be, then we will find a place in the entire world, in the entire, accounting profession of the world, that will find a place as far as internal audit standards are concerned. The friends, always, as I told you, the heart of CS Nanda beats for small and medium practitioners. This series, this year, almost every week or every fortnight, we're having some program or other on internal audit. And but for Corona, the COVID pandemic, where we are not able to physically move, we have planned to have at least 1 or 2 outreach programs in the entire length and breadth of the country, whereby we want to demonstrate and bring to the knowledge of the entire commerce industry the need for having this internal audits, the need for getting benefit of the internal audit by child accountants. But still, we have put our efforts to see that we reach the industry through in the virtual mode also. He is a great administrator. He is a troubleshooter in the central council. Whenever we have to give you some topic stuff, wherever the difference of opinion is there, he has done the steps in the shoes and see that it's resolved. So wherever he is there, everything is present. That's why everyone likes CS Nanda. So with this, I introduce you my brother Charanjit Singh Nanda, and I am sure with the type of speakers we have, the scholar speakers today, we are going to benefit a lot of the deliberations today. So with this, over to CS Nanda. Before that, we have a short program. Members, please understand, this is a program which is conducted in a both physical mode as well as virtual mode, forming the guidance given by the government of India and the government of Andhra Pradesh. Being in the physical mode also, we have a short lighting of the lamp. We need to light the lamp and deliver his keynote address. So I request the CS Nanda to join us in lighting the lamp for inaugurating the webinar today.
Thank you. Sir.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back yet again with another session on mentoring SMPs. You are aware that the board has taken this religious step to ensure that in this pandemic, the SMPs are empowered so that they can do hand holding not only to the clients, but to the regulators, to government, and all public at large. You are all aware that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, was set up an Act of Parliament way back on 1st July 1949. The most important document of the democracy, the Constitution was not adopted. All of us are well aware that the Constitution of this country was promulgated on 26 January 1950. The pertinent question that arises is what prompted the government of India to set up an Institute of Chartered Accountants of India when its own democratic setup was not in place? Answer is very candid, very forthcoming, very simple. They were looking for a disciplined band of soldiers to steer this country out of confusion. And we chartered accountants have always taken this clarion call. Ladies and gentlemen, we have again come back to ensure that we work in that tandem. And in this series, we are holding this first physical come virtual program here to ensure that membership is benefited in the large. I take a great pride in acknowledging the presence of the vice chairman, the man behind the entire show here, the man who is totally working incessantly day and night to ensure that members not only of bigger towns but mostly towns and students are equally benefited by the working of the institute. My vice chairman, CA Prasanna Kumar, who hails from Vizag. Now, I am thankful to the committee who has taken the onerous task of hosting this program. I acknowledge the presence of the chairman, CAG Bharti Devi, the vice chairman, CA S. Murli Krishna, the secretary, CA G. Vasu Devan, immediate past chairman, CA S.N. Charpati Rao, who speaks very fluent Hindi, the treasurer, CA Prasanta Kumar Pandya, and three of the revered speakers who have come here to make the SMPs go home more enlightened. They are CA D.T. Singhal, CA Manoj Agarwal, and CA Jitendra Indoria. I also acknowledge the presence of the very vibrant staff of ISBA, CA Charlie Jindal, and Advocate Arun Agarwal. So, ladies and gentlemen, I go on with my keynote address so that things are put in the right perspective. The first topic which we intend to discuss today is safe from the start, leveraging internal audit in fraud risk management. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that internal audit, which emerged with different connotations, today has come where the entire expectations from the management is from internal audit. I'm reminded of a couplet which says, "मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, लोग जुड़ते गए, कारवां बनता गया." इतना अजीम कारवां तैयार है. I will give the English version of it. It says that I had started alone, but then people joined, and now I'm a part of a big caravan. That caravan is ready. The profession is now reaping the benefit of serving the society in its socialistic objective. We chartered accountants are known for our contribution to the society. 21 crores we gave when pandemic struck to the Prime Minister Relief Fund. We are ready, apart from the donations which were made by individual chartered accountants. Let us understand that we are a clan, we are a community who would always stand by the nation at the time of distress. So how do you leverage internal audit in fraud risk management? We have to understand what is the effect of fraud in our organization. Fraud makes us damp. Our spirits go down. It is like a termite which eats the entire organization, although from outside it looks strong. The moment you see a small force, it falls like a pack of cards. Now, second ingredient, the second biggest losses that fraud can ensure that all profits of the organization drain away. You may have no local standing, you may have no network, and going concern may also be questioned because you don't have right things. Therefore, due diligence is required. Now, what are the role of organizations in identifying frauds? Number one, the organization needs a robust internal control procedure to limit the risk of fraud. Secondly, the organization should assess the fraud risk exposure periodically, identify a risk, mitigate it, and be ready for any future risks that may come in. The organization should also have a suitable plan for identification of fraud and management of it. Please understand, fraud is always perpetrated by people who are very intelligent. They know the entire process, and therefore they are in a position to take advantage of that position. And therefore, the risk of fraud should be included in the audit plan and each audit assignment to evaluate the adequacy of anti-fraud controls. We need to understand where we are. Now, what are the role of chartered accountants? What are the role of internal auditors in identifying frauds? Number one, identifying the areas which may be subject to fraud, which are prone to fraud, which are most susceptible. Assist in developing new controls. Every time ever-changing controls have to come in because fraud will also step in at different perspectives. Detecting existing fraud and suggesting its corrective action. Very, very important. In the last years, testing existing controls and suggesting actions to fill gaps which allow fraud to perpetrate in the organization. You have to stop immediately and see that no more further loss is made. Second topic of the day, value addition will be cost reduction by SMPs. How do SMPs add value and help reduction of cost of corporates and other clients? Now, what are the expectations of stakeholders? Number one, business management. They expect the internal auditors to do business management because there are frequent touch points to discuss status and results, early insights and ability to respond to results, and the details of all issues ultimately culminate in adding value to the perspectives or the thought process of the management. Audit committee, very, very important. Less frequent touch points, not very frequent, but brief overviews of individual audits. They can take corrective action because people look at the country which says that if there's a chartered accountant, the chairman of the internal audit has to be a chartered accountant. So people with a financial background can always step in and see that the stakeholders are not subject to unnecessary loss or verification. Third is executive team, very, very important. Executive team steps in wherever their intelligence is required. Ownership of the findings is taken by them. They give the reports, they overview the entire process and try to determine and give answers of all the findings. The value of audit findings to improve business performance is also vested on them. What is the role of internal auditors? In corporates, number one, they are charged with ensuring that corporate process and associated controls are running as intended. Very, very important. An internal auditor understands the entire process and the safeguards. And if you find there are certain leakages that are immediately blocked, they are immediately put at bay. The internal auditor determines that if the process of corporation could be improved, improvisation of processes, save the corporate and make it more robust, more tax-saving. And third is to ensure that resources of the corporates are used effectively. We chartered accountants and internal auditors who do the internal audit function are essentially undertaking the management function. So we have to step into the shoes of the management and ensure that all unnecessary losses are curtailed. What is the value addition by internal audit? Operational and quality effectiveness. Yes, you create effectiveness. Everything has to be robust, effective. You have to take care of business risks, see how they can be mitigated. You have to ensure that cost and waste reduction opportunities. Wherever cost or waste can be reduced, wherever there can be value add in the process can be more efficient is the work of the internal auditors. The business or process controls so that unnecessary losses or wastages are curtailed. Process and business efficiencies so that the core business also gets to benefit from the indulgence of the internal auditor in effective corporate governance so that conflicts does not arise. The third and the last topic of the day is procurement to pay process. Very, very important. Why internal audit of procurement? The most important thing in the manufacturing system is the material. It is very important cost, therefore the cost has to be monitored. The objectivity of taking material procurement is to ensure that right material is bought at the right price, at right time, and right quantity. If you do that, the results are manifold. How does internal audit step in and help? Number one, identifying procurement frauds. If you look into forensics, you will see that at least 40% of forensics circle around procurement fraud. Teaming and leading, some money is taken from somebody, given to somebody, material supplied by somebody, less money is given, fictitious vendor accounts are opened and money is transferred. Second, highlighting red flags and procurement process. Yes, you understand what are the problems. Yes, you have to highlight red flags that these are the processes which are prone to frauds. Conduct data analytics for extracting procurement loopholes. Data analytics has become a great opportunity for us. This pandemic, we have to shift our mindset from regular practice to technology. Technology is a great enabler and we should be benefited if we understand data analytics. Conducting investigation of procurement fraud. If there is a procurement fraud, we have to go and conduct the investigation. How the internal auditors are expected to address new and familiar risks and opportunities in more efficient manner. Number one, fostering greater supply chain transparency. You have supply chain management centers now. You have to foster better of them. Increase the use of technology to audit key business process, supplier management, because technology will ensure that not a single facet goes unheard, goes unnoticed. Addressing and managing existing and emerging risks. How do you take care of those things? The fourth is enhancing efficiency through technology-enabled auditing. Very, very important. Technology will step in and ensure that things are put in the right perspective. Nurturing internal control collaboration externally and ensuring that no fraud occur in the process of procurement and supply and right availability of material at the right time is ensured. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will not take much of time. We have three of our very respected, revered, and experienced speakers waiting for their scintillating presentation. So, I request the Vice Chairman to take the things forward. It was a great pleasure coming on to Visakhapatnam, a place which I love most because people are so lovely and they're so contributory to the profession. Yes, we need to have such people who are able to contribute to the cause of the profession and be an example for younger crowds so that they are proud to be part of this profession. I want to thank you all for overwhelming presence, particularly on the virtual mode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the excellent presentation and setting the tone for the today's SFP webinar. May we not request the renowned personality, Deepti Singhal, to speak on the topic value addition, cost reduction by small and medium practitioners.
Thank you very much, Prasanna ji. First of all, let me thank CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji, CA Prasanna Kumar ji, the chairman and the vice chairman of the Internal Standard Board of ICAI, CA Bharti Devi, CA S. Murali Krishna, the chairperson and the vice chairman of Visakhapatnam branch of SIRC ICAI, and all the other senior functionaries on the dais and also who have made this program possible. Thank you for having me to speak on this topic. This is a very good topic after my own heart. I'll just share my screen, please. Okay, so the topic today is value addition, cost reduction by SMPs, and why internal audit. I think this is a series of seminars on mentoring SMPs which I've been seeing the institute conducting it under the aegis of the Internal Standards Board, and I find that it's very interesting because there is so much of value add to the profession. If we see the scenario around, I would say you have the tax audit limit which has been increased. You have number of government agencies, banks, and other agencies where, because of use of technology, outsourcing may decrease. Outsourcing of professional jobs to chartered accountants may decrease. There is a recent RBI guideline where they said that internal audit should be conducted in-house. If you look at all these things, then I think internal audit consulting is a great area for SMPs to be practicing and getting a lot of value out of the profession, getting a value, realizing value for themselves. Based on my personal experience of internal auditing in the last 30 years, I can say that value addition and specifically improvement of performance to organizations in the small sector, medium sector, or even large sector by SMPs would yield a lot of value to the SMPs. Now, when we go out to do a professional job, what does a SMP want? I think there are two things which are necessary or which are required by a SMP. One is professional satisfaction for the job, and second is, of course, the value derived, the fees derived from that job. Now, that can be increased only if value is delivered. In my opinion, the performance of the organization is improved by the practicing chartered accountant, by the SMP. So I will dwell on value addition and cost reduction, and I'll do that using a series of slides, but would focus on small case studies, practical case studies that we have encountered in our jobs that we have carried out across the country. So first, let me just dwell on the definition of internal audit. Internal audit, this is the definition by ICA. Internal audit provides independence, assurance on the effectiveness of internal controls and risk management processes to enhance the governance and achieve organizational objectives. Now, uh, this summarizes what an internal auditor is supposed to be doing. Let me switch to the definition of internal audit by Institute of Internal Auditors. Now, internal audit is an independent, objective, assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. Here, I am just showing this definition or dwelling on this definition to point out that the definition prior to 1998, in 1998, this definition was revised by, prior to 1998, the definition was only an assurance activity. After 98, the IA added assurance and consulting activity because a lot of importance has been given to consulting because they found worldwide internal auditors, including in India, are laying a lot of emphasis on consulting activity while they are carrying out internal audit. Even as our chairperson of Internal Audit Standards Board, Nandaji said, you have to add value. You have to add value throughout the process in an organization if that organization has to really derive value from the outsourced or in-house internal auditor per se. Today's my talk will be focused on value addition by internal audit. So I think I'll focus on three things. One is effective internal audit because to derive value, you need an effective internal audit to be delivered. So what is effective internal audit? Number two is how do you reposition internal audit to a consulting slant so that more value can be delivered to the organization and in turn more value can be delivered to the SMP. That is the second. And the third is how do you improve the performance of the organization? So there will be some case studies which I'll talk about on how can you improve the performance of the organization to ensure that there is value addition. So coming to the first element, which is effective internal audit. Now, if you look at the sum total of what is internal audit, you will find that there is a proactive auditor. There has to be a participative auditee, and both together would then deliver an effective internal audit. Now, these two words, they have a lot of background to it. We can say proactive auditor, it's very easy to say, but what does a proactive auditor mean? What is a participative auditee? So now a proactive auditor, in short, I can say is a person who is competent, number one. Number two, who has business knowledge of the business that he is auditing. He is in a position to deal with people at all levels, dealing with auditee, dealing with the audit committee if there is an audit committee. If it's a partnership firm, it's a small firm or a small organization, then dealing with the partners, dealing with the owners per se. And when we talk about a competent or skilled business focused internal audit, then I think the question arises that if we send out two junior people to carry out internal audit, value will not be derived by the organization. So a senior partner or a senior functionary in the internal audit department of the CF or in a SMP, the owner himself or the practicing chartered accountant will have to devote a lot of time if it has to be an effective internal audit in terms of value addition. That is number one. And then, of course, the participative auditee, I think if we go out to do an internal audit, I think there is a common refrain. There are a number of things which come out. One is, I'll just read some of them. When you go out to do internal audit throughout, what do you encounter? You say, the auditee would say, I don't know what the internal audit is doing. Or the auditee would say, after you've done the audit, they'll say, this was not discussed with me at all. Or they'll say, this was carried out last year or maybe 2 years back. So why do you want to do it audit this year? This does not add any value to me. At the end, they'll say this does not add any value to me. Last year your team came, or the last quarter your team came, or maybe last month your team came, and you are asking this again and again. I have to explain this again and again. I have given access to the system. I have given you view rights, but your team does not know how to use the IT system. This is not how the matter is. You have reported something, but you have not understood it properly. The auditor has not understood the issue. like I can just go on and on. We just compile this list to say what can go wrong with an audit process per se. And that list ran into, 50, 60 items. I just read out a few of them. What is a common refrain by auditees or by the companies that you go out to do audit? So you need to remove all these things. A auditor, a proactive auditor has to work to ensure all these things are removed to deliver an effective internal audit and then add value. Now, here, to cut it short, in today's presentation, I can just say if an effective internal audit has to be delivered, then there are two or three things, very important things. One, the internal audit is carried out by a very competent person, a senior person, and not by juniors. Number two, the junior may assist them, but it has to be carried out by a senior person, by a person who has knowledge of the business and who's competent, who's able to deal with people, who's able to relate to the owners and to the partners or the board of directors or the company senior functionary. Now, when we talk about repositioning, again, I think I'll just go back to say, what are the element of an effective internal audit? If I just stand back and say, let's not get into the definition of internal audit, but let's talk about as a practitioner. I'm a small practitioner, I'm a medium-sized practitioner. So what is effective internal audit to me? Maybe 30 years back, my boss said, there's a Michael Porter value chain concept. If you deliver a service and then if you get paid for it in time, then that's value is complete. The value chain is complete. So I would just go back to say that, what is an effective internal audit to me? First is satisfaction of the client. Number two is when you give a bill, you get paid immediately. You get paid early. That's number one. Continuity of the job. Number two, you feel welcomed by the owner. When you walk into as a partner or as a proprietor of a SMP, if you go to a business, you go and meet a partnership firm, or you go and meet a small company, or you go and meet a medium-sized organization where you're carrying out internal audit, then you are welcomed. You can sit down with the owners and discuss with them on policy issues. You can discuss with them about business. You can discuss with them about the environment, what's happening, about new processes, new people they want to employ, expansion, whatever their plans are. So you feel welcome. The staff there welcomes you and feel that it's a value add. They can turn to you for advice. You are treated like an advisor. So I think here are some of the elements which demonstrate that effective internal audit is being delivered because you're welcome. That's the perception that you're adding value to the organization, and then only these things will happen. I think that's my definition of effective internal audit. A value chain is complete and you're delivering you're getting satisfaction and good realization. Now, how do you reposition internal audit? Nandaji talked about risk management, business risk management. You have control self-assessment, creating an accountability environment, what to audit, priorities, subjects, issues that has to be decided. And how do you design your service so that, you get a consulting focus and you're able to add a value of the process. I'll just come back to you with some examples on these. What is repositioning? Where you are to where you want to be. So basically, maybe you're doing a traditional practice and you would like to move to a consulting practice. You would like to get more value out of it. You would like to be, maybe you're doing a half-yearly internal audit, you are doing a quarterly internal audit, and you want to do it every month. You like to consult the client every month. So you get paid every month, So how do you reposition that? How do you be a different person function? How do you change the way you anticipate and interact, with conditions and circumstances which are there? What are the opportunities? And when the opportunities come, can you take those opportunities? So how do you recognize the opportunities? So I just talk about repositioning internal audit with few examples that are jotted down. I just jotted down few examples. I'll take one very small case study. I fictionalized all the company and the different areas that I'm going to talk about. So it's not related to one particular organization that I'm talking about. It's all fictionalized with all our experience over the last 10, 15 years. So let's talk about a small company which is dealing into trading house. I've taken a trading house and said, okay, let's take a trading house which is importing chemicals from South Korea or importing chemicals from, Thailand. And how does the business look like? It's a small turnover. So you are appointed as an internal auditor. You go out and do internal auditing. But as you go internal auditing, you interact with the owners and you become closer to the owners and you say you want to give a consulting focus. So how does the owner look at the business? How do you position, how does the business owner look at it on a daily basis? Can you design a dashboard for the owner and say the owner would be in a position every day in the morning to get from his accountant, what's his debtor's position, what is creditor's position, what is his bank position, what is his stock position, and yesterday what checks were banked in, what payments were made out. So in one page, you could design a dashboard which would come out even from a tele package, and then you could say that's a snapshot of what is the business is as on today morning. When you walk in, when the owner comes in, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, maybe design a dashboard for them. Just giving an example. I'm just talking from my head. We did design this for an organization. So, just design a dashboard so that owner knows every day what's happening. What's his cash flow? What's his stock? What is debtors? What is creditors? Where are you standing? Because a very small owner usually has one accountant, two accountants, very difficult for them to understand what's happening unless it is too late. So maybe you guide and you're able to say this is the dashboard for them. What is their working capital requirement today? How much working capital is being used in the business? So what is the debtors? What is the stock levels? Can they reduce the debtors? Can you work with them to ensure that the clients start paying advances to them when they deliver the material? Can you reduce the price and still make more profit than when you are charging them higher and delivering to the client for 90 days or 120 days? Can you give them an advance? How do you stock? Can you import it in cycles in such a fashion that the imports, the cycle time is lower so that you have less stocks, your carrying cost is lower. So what's your working capital cycle? What's your sales? What's your stock to sales ratio? How much stocks do you have vis-a-vis your sales? So maybe it's 3. For a particular business, I know it was a small business, it was 3 and it became 5.5 after 3 years of working with them, after 2 years of working with them. That means their profit margins, which is maybe 3 or 5% net profit, went up, 5.5 times. Just see the rotation and see how much profit more they made. So, their bank balance, their CC limits which they are utilizing went down. So what we are saying is that you're working with them on a consulting basis to ensure that they're improving. So you are repositioning your internal audit to deliver consulting value. I've just given you very few examples. Then you're looking at the costs. Now the same would apply to a medium-sized organization, medium-sized corporate, and a very large-sized corporate also. Now for a medium-sized corporate also, the questions to ask is what are the elements of cost which are hitting the profit and loss account? The element of cost, for example, let's take this importing organization. What are the elements of cost? The elements of cost are one is the purchasing cost, which is the highest. Number 2 is your import. What is your import cost? Now, in an import cost, does the person give you on a CIF basis, or do you say, I will pick it up from your factory from South Korea? So my CHA will pick it up and you work out the cost and say that works out cheaper to me. Number 2, what is your cost from the port to your warehouse? Can the transportation cost go down? Then you benchmark with some other players in the market and say the cost is going down. What is your insurance cost vis-a-vis others who are paying insurance? What's your warehouse cost compared to, per square feet of others' warehouse cost which you are using to stock your material? What's your cost to supply to the customer? What's your logistic cost? What's your office cost? How do you maintain your accounts? How do you maintain your banking? How do you remit funds to the foreign buyer? Do you have a dashboard where you can actually go during the day and say, I can fix my price, or I can fix the dollar rate, during the day, and then that will be paid out by the bank the next day or in the evening, So can you do that? Have you taken a portal or a dashboard from the bank to do that? There are even for a very small entity, there are a number of questions. The questions are asked to examine every element of cost. I think Nandaji talked about the process, adding value in the process. So every particular element of cost which is hitting the profit and loss account, if questions are asked, then reposition your internal audit from a internal audit to a consulting focus. Make a lot of difference to the organization, and the owners, the partners, or the directors will rely on the internal audit more and more, because who does not value addition in an organization? Cost reduction, or maybe cost reduction is a dirty word, so I'd say cost optimization. A cost optimization or addition of value to the process, to the business, is welcomed by one and all. We have been seeing that where we have started as an internal auditor and are actually doing consulting, a lot of consulting assignments for the organization. They bank on you for new policies, they bank on you for new projects, they bank on you when they appoint new people. So you are on the interview panel when they're appointing new people. So you are getting immersed and working with the owners, working with the business to make things happen. So I think that's the value addition and the cost reduction I was talking about. So I think what needs to be asked by an internal auditor is, how can we do a particular process or a particular thing differently? How can you avoid, or how can you reduce the cost of a particular thing by looking at it, by your experience from other organizations, and also by benchmarking? Now here, a very important thing, let me tell you, is with technology, with digitization, with social media, today a small SMP or a small practitioner is in a position to equal a big four auditor. Why? Because there is an information explosion. A lot of information is available. So if there is a intelligent and diligent internal auditor, you can actually do benchmarking by looking at various sites. You can Google and get information. You can also procure information from outside. You can pay for certain paid services and get information from outside, where benchmarking would be possible, where you can have the business requisition the data you require and then work on it along with the business to add value to the organization. I think today, if there would be services available where with the HSN code, you can actually look at what material came into the port, what material was ordered by a competition, what material is at what rate was it ordered. So you can do your procurement better. You can benchmark and say, so there's very little difference between different players. It's only how robust your process is, how you are running your ship, which will make a difference compared to the others. Because maybe the cost, your cost elements would be different, your way of running the business would be different, but the external environment, it's very competitive. So there's no much leeway for a business other than to make your own processes robust, where an internal auditor can help a lot. So we are talking about repositioning internal audit. So this is one example I gave you from a trading outfit. The other examples, larger organizations, I'm talking about, even SMPs are delivering value to larger organizations today, or carrying out internal audit for larger organizations is in an organization where we are working, since we are there for last, say, 4 or 5 years, and we had number of people working there throughout the year. When they shifted to a SAP system, or when they shifted to an ERP, they wanted a person who would have a good knowledge about all the business processes in the organization. And what do you demand from the SAP vendor? What do you demand from the implementation partner in terms of, in each function, what are the top 5 things that need to be configured to ensure that better decision making can be done and the ERP can be used in an optimal fashion? So there we said, okay, we can have one of our qualified person, one of our persons from our team to be part of the ERP implementation team. So that's a consulting focus again, because, but earlier for the first 4 or 5 years, the person concerned was carrying out internal auditing. So that's one example again of a consulting focus, adding value to the organization, because a new ERP means a lot of value gets added to the organization over a period of time. The second example is organization is going out to make a building, maybe a container freight station, or maybe a building project, or maybe a new project. They are doing expansion in the existing factory, and the internal auditor gets involved. You are invited by the management to get involved at the beginning. So basically, when the plans are being frozen, you are invited into the team. You are said, okay, when procurement is being done, you are part of the team. You do not take executive decisions to procure, but you are part of the team understanding what is happening. So you look at the process where all data is available to the procurement team, and then you say, what are the estimations? You understand all those. After every month or after every 2 months, when the team is making a presentation on the progress of the project, because a lot of value is involved, your team can get in and look at estimate versus actuals. What are the differences? Compliances, are statutory compliances done? Because that's very important today, and you have a plethora, or you have number of statutory compliances which are required. So you talk about whether those have been carried out, not carried out properly, And of course, how is your cost running vis-a-vis your estimation? So, the things are streamlined, and you can give an early warning signal to the owners, to the process heads, to the organization, so that things are corrected at the beginning rather than you complete the project and say things have gone wrong. Because you see a number of cases where you complete the project and you say now it will take another 6 months. Because why? Because we forgot some balancing equipment, because we did not do this right. So maybe if, as a person who understands processes, as a person who understands costing, as a person who understands commercials, you get involved as an internal auditor in the project without taking executive decisions, but viewing the project and monitoring it along with the management to give early warning signals. That's again a consulting focus. Another example is that usually smaller organizations, large organizations have very robust systems of financial monitoring. They have very robust systems of monthly review meetings. But you could actually ask smaller companies where you're carrying out internal audit to start, or maybe join into their monthly review meetings, or have a monthly financial projections. And in those projections, you can look at your profit and loss. You can look at your financials and say what action can be taken the next month to yield better results for the organization. So you can be part of that committee where you're an observer. You're an internal auditor is an observer, and you get in and actually work with the management to improve the organization. So that's another example. We find that a lot of organizations welcome that, because you are giving a value-added role in terms of giving advice to the organization, how things can be run better, what are the problems, what are the issues, and how they can be attacked to ensure that they are elevated and things can run better for the organization person. So this is, I talked about some roles, some examples, practical examples of repositioning of internal audit. Now, how do you negotiate the internal audit plan projects? And I talked about why negotiate, because you want to get better value, you want to get job satisfaction, you want to get better value out of the project. Basically, you need better remuneration, more value to be more involved. So what is the role? Maybe you can shift to a consulting role, add more value in internal auditing per se. The resources needed for this role, as I said, you can hire more resources. A senior level resources would be required if you need to get more value. Also, some expert advice may be required from outside, where you are not an expert in the business, where as the business leans on you more as an internal auditor, they will listen to you and be willing to hire external resources, where you can work with the external resources, partner with the external expertise to ensure better value is delivered to the organization. Usually, I find that small CA firms are quite threatened with partnerships, or thinking in terms of partnering with external expertise. I'm not talking about external CA firms alone. I'm talking about maybe lawyers, or I'm talking about maybe engineers, or I'm talking about areas where you require expertise from outside, where they can help the business. So you need to build partnerships, and you need to work with the management so that value is delivered. I think management values that over a period of time. We have seen that happen. In fact, we have seen it happen that we are not a big four. So maybe if we are carrying out audit in say Himachal Pradesh, or we are carrying out audit in Orissa, where we are doing maybe a quarterly audit. So maybe our team is flying in from Bombay to do a quarterly audit there. And you find that after working with them for 8 or 10 years, you have so much trust that you actually tell the owner that you please appoint an in-house internal person who will also report back to you, your team, and your senior team gets in once a quarter, so that both teams are working. So there's a person on the ground inside in the organization. At the same time, you are going in, flying in, and also working every quarter, so that together you are delivering value to the organization. Because as you deliver more organization, the owners will trust you more. It's a partnership. So negotiating techniques, time scale for repositioning. I can come to the third dimension. I said I'll try to keep the talk very simple. So the first was delivering an effective internal audit. Perception, I talked about perception, being welcomed, being paid properly and timely. The second was repositioning your internal audit and delivering consulting. And third is improve the corporate performance. So now we always talked about, as chartered accountants, we keep talking about improving control. Very important. This is the most important thing. Like a brake in a car, you require controls because they enable performance. They don't stop you, but they enable that there is no accidents. They enable that you drive your car smoothly. So improving control, yes, a must. But let's step back and say, do we talk about improving control or improving performance? I think we need to improve the performance. Uh, I think 5 or 6 years back, my partner Manish Pipale and myself, we interviewed 14 chief internal auditors in industry across the country. Uh, there's a book which is published, lead best practices from leading chief audit executives in the country, and that was published by Walter Kluwer. So they published a book in which there's an interview. They give the how an internal audit runs in each company, and since it's in public domain, I can talk about it. The chief internal auditor of one of the leading companies, Godrej, he has a mandate that whatever value spent on them, they have to actually ensure that there are 3x saving to the company at the end of the year, and that has to be mapped on the profit and loss account. So it's laid down. Now we can go on debating about it, saying that okay, we improve, we give assurance, we improve the process, and there's no need to be talk about improving performance or actually putting it down on paper. But even though we may keep talking about improving control, even though we may keep talking about adding value, or maybe improving the systems and processes and looking at compliances, very important again. But at the end of the day, personally speaking, it's my personal opinion here, improving performance helps. If we are in a position at the end of the year for every client to put a one pager or just to put 2 pages on how we have helped improve the performance and how much value was saved, or how much value growth took place, or how much value they earned more because of the work of the internal audit or the consulting work which was delivered during the year, maybe quarterly, 6-monthly audit, yearly audit, or maybe monthly audit, or whatever the frequency, that goes a long way in improving the image of internal audit, making the internal audit team dear to the top management, and partnering with the top management. So I think it's important to improve value. Again, let me tell you, all these workshops that we are having, seminars that we are having on mentoring SMPs. Now, I have been seeing a series of SMPs being carried out by the Internal Audit Standard Board, conducted by the Internal Audit Standards Board, and I find that there are so many speakers, from industry and from practicing fraternity who have participated here. Now, all those recordings would be available, and one way to just go through them. That itself will give you a lot of tips on how can you improve the performance for organization, to add value to the SMP. So I think this again is a second forum which is available to practicing chartered accountants, a very good initiative. Now, let me now just step back and again give you 1 or 2 examples. Let's take a procurement example. I think there's a speaker who's going to speak on procure to pay. So a very exciting area, because procurement is a exciting area to work in for the internal auditor, whether it is a large corporate, a small partnership firm, or even the government sector. So how do you do an audit of procurement? I'll just see, we try to work out and say there are 50 things you can do in procurement before even you can start audit. You can actually take the indent files, the purchase order files, the receipts, which is the GRNs or the consumptions, the bill booking, the payment files, and you can run analytics on it. We talked about data analytics. I think one of the functionaries talked about data analytics. Nandaji only talked about data analytics. So we can look at, there's no duplication. Then we can look at what's the cycle time between all these, from indent to PO, PO to receipt, receipt to, on the due dates, and what's the cycle time like till the time you make the payment. We can look at how are these items being procured. Can there be substitutes? Can you reduce the cost of these items being procured? How do you get this material? Like, do you buy it from the authorized vendor? Just giving you an example, our team was looking at in one of the organizations, they're looking at bearings, always used in large manufacturing enterprises. And you say few lakhs of bearing used every 6 months, and you say, do you buy it from the authorized vendor? How much discount you get it on the price list? And all that information, as I talk to you, you can just go to the bearings manufacturer website, and it will tell you in that city or in that region who are the authorized vendors. Now, all this information is available in a digital form, which was not so few years back. Today it's available. So what I'm telling you is all this information can be looked at by internal auditor to look at it. Another example I can talk about is buying sugar. One of our clients was just buying sugar, a truck a month. And we said, why do you want to buy it from a broker? Why don't you buy it directly from the mill, which is just nearby? So they switched to buying it from a mill and they save 3%, 4% cost every month on that load which they bought. So example is, how do you improve the performance, corporate performance in different areas? Very important. And as I said earlier, a very important point in cost reduction exercises or in cost optimization exercises is that most of the information today is available in digital form, on social media, on use of technology. You can get all that information, procure all that information, either procure or get it for free. And you can actually benchmark and see what's happening. So I think that makes life much, much easier, provided there is an intelligent and diligent internal auditor. So I think this is improving the corporate performance dimension, which I talked about. Now, which are the other assurance functions? So can you form an alliance when you walk in? This is one example which I'll talk about. I think then I'll stop because the time is up. So I'll just take this last slide, which is strategic alliances with other functions. So what are the strategic alliances with other functions? You have the ISO 9000 function, you have 14,000, which is the environmental function. So does an internal auditor go walk down to the management representative and say, which are the non-conformities that you encountered in this function in procurement, or which are the non-conformities you encountered in procurement, or which are the non-conformities you encountered in stores, because you carry out audits. People carry out audits in manufacturing organizations, service organizations where they have ISO 9000. So did you what was the corrective action taken against those non-conformities? So that can form the basis of your audit. That can form the basis to understand the organization to deliver value for them. So this is sort of alliance which you can have with other functions. You can invite a guest person in your team. If you have got 2 or 3 locations, you can ask the organization whether you can carry a manufacturing person, or you can get the expertise of one of the persons to be a guest auditor with you to another location, which will help you to do your job better, or whether you can take in a person from the other costing function to carry with you to the manufacturing, where they can actually work and see what sort of deviations are being delivered or by being reported by the costing function, which can form the basis for you to take your exercise further in terms of exercise which you are carrying out on the manufacturing side. So I think there is a lot of information or a lot of alliances which can be possible for an innovative internal auditor to work in an organization and add value. I can just go on and on, but I'd like to stop here because I think I have exceeded my time limit already. So business risk management, I'll not go into this. I think in some of the sessions you would have seen this. There is just one last slide which I'll talk about is from an internal auditor, think about yourself as a control self-assessment facilitator. Now, I'm not going to explain control self-assessment here. I'm going to say from one-on-one, as you treat as an internal auditor, let's talk about 1-2 with many, many people. You're interacting with many. Instead of considering yourself as an expert analyst, you are a facilitator. Treat yourself as a guiding inexperts. There are a lot of experts in the organization. They know their job. You have to guide them, facilitate, and get work done. Instead of making statements, asking questions. Instead of judging situations, not judging openly. Let it come out from the people. Instead of writing the report, collect client data. There's a lot of data. You can run a lot of analytics, collect the client data and work on that. Instead of setting the pace, guide the pace. And instead of the process owner, be a process manager. So I think this is the role reversal for internal auditor. With that, I'll stop here. Once again, thank everybody. But before I switch off, I think one very important thing is, I think initially somebody introduced and said we underwent the Peter Drucker course at Claremont Graduate University in the US. Now, one of the things that Peter Drucker the management guru used to talk about was that if you attend a workshop or a seminar on Friday or Saturday, then what are you going to do on Monday morning when you go to office? So I am just calling for action in saying that, you attend this wonderful seminar today. You have speakers speaking on mentoring SMPs. So what are the top 3 things you learn from this and take back to your office on Monday morning so that you can, act on that and add value to the profession, to yourself, being selfish, to yourself. With this, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Five to six. क्या हो गया आवाज क्यों नहीं आ रही है
Thank you, Deepji sir. Thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation. Now, I would like to invite Murali Krishnan sir again for inviting the next speaker. Murali Krishnan sir, please take it over.
So Murali Krishna sir, please unmute yourself. We are unable to hear you. Suresh, laptop is in mute.
Not a problem. In that case, can I request Manoj Agarwal ji? Sir, please, you may please start your session.
Thank you, Shalini ji. Let me first put the slide on the screen. I hope my slides are visible.
It's visible, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks. So thank you, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and I'm thankful to CA Charanjit Jyot Singh Nandaji, the Central Council member ICI and Chairman Internal Audit Standard Board, CA Prasanna Kumarji, Vice Chairman Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI, CA Bharti Devi, Chairman Visakhapatnam branch of SIRC, and CAS Murali Krishna, Vice Chairman Visakhapatnam branch of SIRC. Thank you for giving me this opportunity for coming to this August Dais and share my view on this interesting topic of leveraging internal audit in fraud risk management. I hope you have also noted I hope you have also noted I began the topic with safe from the start. So we will discuss what do I mean by safe from start. So Shalini ji, as I understand, I need to wind up by 7 o'clock, right?
Sir, what?
I need to wrap up the session by 7 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir, you can, sir.
Yeah.
You may, it's 45 minutes is yours, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So friends, let me, so though my introduction is here, but now again, this is a brief introduction. So I'm Manoj Agrawal. I'm fellow chartered accountant from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I'm DISA, CIA, CRMS, CISA. I had the internal audit. I'm also the member of International Internal Audit Standard Board of IIA and member of Board of Governors of Institute of Internal Auditors, Bombay chapter. Now, this is the most important slide for me and for my various association and employer. All the content of the presentation constitute the opinion of speaker and speaker alone, which is me, and they do not present the view and opinion of speakers, employer, supervisor, nor do they present the views of the organization, business institution the speaker is or has been part of. Some of the situation may not be true, and identities of the parties involved may have been disguised, and images used may be subject to copyright. So this is my opinion only. They do not represent the views of any of the association and my employers. This is the most important slide. So friend, many of you, maybe every one of you is familiar with the fraud triangle. A fraud triangle comprises of the pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. Pressure is motivation or incentive to commit fraud, which can be external or internal pressure. Rationalization, where we daydream that whatever we are doing is right. And opportunity, which is the knowledge and ability to carry out fraud. So when this three triangle meets, it create a fraud triangle. So we are going to discuss these three axes, and we are going to discuss one axis, which is opportunity, the key, the knowledge and the ability to carry out fraud, which is, I believe, where is the internal audit can play a great role in fraud risk management. Now, the question is why internal audit and auditors? There are many reasons, but when we think why internal audit and auditors, we always think and believe that the various pronouncement, various standard, various position paper, they put the onus on the management that it is the management responsibility to prevent fraud. True, it is management responsibility to prevent fraud, but at the same time, if we are doing internal audit, we also have some roles to play. And that is what the regulator demands, and that is what the various enactment law demands. This is what the standard demands, and this is what the public demands. So wherever there is a fraud, the always the first thing comes up, where are the internal auditors? I hope by leveraging some of the items here, you would be able to prevent certain frauds and come out very strongly in favor of the various companies to safeguard the money and their reputation. A median fraud cost an organization almost to the tune of 110,000 USD, which is almost say about 90 lakhs to a crore. So if your organization, even if it is a small, medium enterprises which get hit, it is quite possible in today's trying time, it can create going concern scenario for that organization. So let's understand what are the regulators' demand, our enactments, our standards, and the public demand. Now, take example our Companies Act 2013. Internal audit does the audit of internal controls. And what are the internal controls? Section 134(5), subsection 134, subsection E, clause E explains internal financial control as, among other things, the prevention and detection of fraud and errors. So you would be auditing policies and procedures, great. You would be ensuring the adherence with company's policies, again, great. You would be doing, let's say, physical assets verification, cash count, again, great. And you will see that it is all the accounting records is appropriate, the so-called CARO. It is great, and timely provision of reliable financial information. But at the same time, one of the key item here is the prevention and detection of frauds and errors. Now, an error can become a fraud, and a fraud can become an error depending upon the point it get detected and corrected, or let's say it get detected. So when companies that put down internal financial control includes prevention, detection of fraud and error, the responsibility is cast on not only on the management but also on the internal auditors when they are doing audits, to ensure that the internal controls are appropriate for prevention and detection of frauds and error. You will find the similar scenario in globally also. For example, the SOX section 3002, which is in America, which has come after the scams from Enron and WorldCom. So again, there they have put the onus on CEO and CFO that they are responsible for internal accounting controls, and they must report any deficiencies in internal accounting controls or any fraud involving the management to audit committee. Now, the both auditors and statutory auditors need to ensure that this is getting done. You know, the existence and effectiveness of the control. If it is not there, then then they are supposed to report it. Now, our own standard of internal audit 11, which is on the fraud risk, consideration of fraud in internal audit. I put down certain paras for your consideration and put down this categories. These categories are my own device. So para 3, it deals with the knowledge and skills to identify indicators of fraud. So my dear friends, you need to have knowledge and skills to identify indicators of fraud. If if somebody is approaching you for to do an internal audit, and if you undertake that assignment, then you must have knowledge and skills to identify indicators of fraud. Of course, when you say you must have, it means either you have you on your own, or you have within your team, or you hire an appropriate person to do that job, or you, after taking the job but before performing the job, you get the right skills and knowledge to identify indicators of fraud. So our ICI runs a beautiful course on frauds, for forensic accounting. So if you don't have, maybe you should undergo that course and get the knowledge and the skills. So I've categorized under proficiency, whether you're proficient. So though we are talking about internal audit, but you need to have that proficiency to identify indicators of fraud. Then para 4, you need to have reasonable knowledge of factors affecting fraud. For example, the fraud triangle. Whether you have the knowledge under what circumstances the fraud can occur or fraud may not occur. So I've just categorized as due professional care. So you are doing evaluation of policy and procedures for internal control. Great. But para 15, you are also required to do evaluation of policies and procedures to identify and assess the risk of fraud. So even if you are doing an assessment on the internal control, you need to consider, if that control is not there, what is the risk of fraud? For example, segregation of duty. If it is not there, whether a fraud can commit. I've categorized as risk management. Then even if fraud is not there, but there is an indicator that fraud can happen, there is a risk that fraud can happen, then you need to communicate that fact to the board. Communication of fraud or fraud risk to the board. So it's not that you need to only communicate if the fraud happened. If there is a chance a fraud can happen, fraud indicators, lack of segregation of duty, one person is doing too many jobs, let's say periodical physical verification is not happening, you are required to report that risk to the board. And so I've classified that as reporting to senior management and board. So if your client says, but there is no fraud, so what? If there is a risk, you need to protect your interest and report that. And documentation on fraud risk factors. So which I classify as documentation. So once you evaluate various controls, you need to also do an evaluation of whether a fraud can happen or not. And of course, you need to document that. Now, the similar thing you will also find in certain international standards on internal audit. Again, you see the category proficiency, due professional care, reporting to the senior management and the board, risk management, engagement objective. So they also say the same thing. For example, you need to have sufficient knowledge to evaluate the risk of fraud and manner in which it is managed. So you need to have knowledge. You need to also have knowledge how the risk is, how the entity is managing the risk of fraud. So they will say, hey, we don't have enough manpower, so one person is only going to do it. I'm not going to hire 3% to do 3 jobs and where people would be remaining idle. Fair enough, but how do you ensure that this one person is not doing any mischief? Due professional care. You need to ensure that the probability of significant error, fraud, non-compliance is considered in your work. Reporting to senior management and the board, reporting must also include significant risk and control issues, including fraud, risk governing issues, and other matters. Risk management, important. Internal audit activity must evaluate the potential of occurrence of fraud and how organization manages risk and engagement objective. You would have 10 audits. So you need to consider the risk of fraud in each and every assignment. It's not that you will be doing, one assessment, very high level assessment, and you say, okay, this is the probability does not exist. You need to do that exercise in each and every assignment. In fact, our recently enacted, the recently issued the CARO, which is going to be effective from 1st April 2021. It requires statutory auditors to evaluate the work of the internal audit, and to review their internal audit reports, and they need to also, comment on the fraud risk. So whatever report you are going to issue, the statutory auditor is also going to review it. So these are certain principles of internal control. The principle framework. So I've taken it from COSO 2013. It gives various principles. They have categorized into 5 groups: control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information communication, monitoring activities. So besides everything, the 8th principle assesses fraud risk. So if you are not assessing the fraud risk, again, you may not be doing your job appropriately. So see, your act requires, our standard requires, the various framework requires, and of course the public demands. Wherever something happens, where are the internal auditors? So this is on the, let's say, basic background. Now you will say, how I can do that? Again, the same fraud triangle. This is into a slightly tweaked it around and given slightly more hint. Perceived pressure, financial pressure, greed, addiction, some drug addict, alcohol addict, or some nowadays I would say share market addict. Somebody's doing some trading into the stock market, losing heavily, then that guy is a risk, huge risk. Poor credit rating or cash management. Now bank is hiring someone, whether they are doing their CIBIL check of that person or not. The person, he may be managing the cash counter and he may have huge debt involved. Dissatisfaction with the pay. Now I'm not going to comment on that in current scenario. Overlook for promotion, it's my right. And perceived opportunity, weak internal controls. If somebody knows that the internal controls are weak, you don't have to think further. Just remember 25 years ago, Harshad Mehta, he has taken opportunity because of weak internal control and make huge amount of money, and which created the stock market crash and creation of NSE. Ineffective monitoring of controls. So, a company may have some certain internal controls, but no review is happening. No review is happening, it means it is as good as no internal control exists. Assets susceptible to a fraud. There are certain assets which are susceptible to fraud. Gift coupons and rationalization. I will pay it back. I deserve a pay raise. It's for a good purpose. So this gives an idea that there is a good opportunity we can do it. Now, where as an internal auditor we can help our small and medium enterprises is this too: perceived opportunity and the perceived pressure. Rationalization, it is difficult to understand sometimes what is happening in the mind of a fraudster. But at the same time, if you are able to control, put appropriate controls on the perceived opportunity, that is, you are removing all the opportunities You work on the perceived pressure. For example, certain background checks can tell you what is happening, and maybe for some critical position, the background check can happen at more frequency instead of once in a lifetime. And if you are able to create examples of fraud detected, you would be also in a position to act on the rationalization. You know, there was one famous experiment which was done in an organization. So what they have found that the people are stealing paper napkins. So what they have done, they have put two eyes there. And similar thing we would have also done in various maybe in personal level, where we have put a CCTV camera. Now other party doesn't know it is working or not, but you have put it. Now this is a broad say groupings of various internal controls which can which is there in, let's say, an organization. For example, there are certain entity level controls, there are period end controls, there are process level controls, anti-fraud controls, general IT controls. Now, which these are some of the controls you might be doing the testing. Now, let me take you the next slide, which is something interesting, which you can use, let's say, as a ready reckoner in your work. So this is a slide on business fraud risk framework, which I was downloaded from the internet. Now it gives you various perspective. Every item here is an audit of conflict of interest, an audit of illegal political contribution, if it is there, an audit of insider trading, if your company is listed, misuse of company assets. So not only let's say senior management, even the lower management can do the misuse of the company management. Related party fraud. Sometimes very difficult to prove it, but at the same time, let's say if you are able to do an audit surrounding that, at least you can ensure that the normal the normal control or normal scenarios in which fraud can occur is not happening. So all these areas are can be a specific internal audit. And my dear friends, I'm saying a specific internal audit. Maybe once you do an audit of, for example, let's say conflict of interest. You identify, look, there's a two possibility. Either you identify conflict of interest or you don't identify. If you don't identify, great. But if you identify conflict of interest, maybe then you need to wear your consultancy hat, and you can help design conflict of interest policy, process, mechanism, forms for your client. Of course, if you find also find a conflict of interest, then so your internal audit standard doesn't require you to actually go and prove that the fraud has happened or go and prove that fraud has not happened. It is always a new assignment. So you say, suppose there are conflict of interest. Now I can do a separate assignment for and to validate the loss which has happened because of conflict of interest situation in your organization. So every item can be an audit. If there is a finding, you can do a separate assignment on fraud, or please do the fraud and forensic course of ICI before doing that assignment. And you can also create a control framework surrounding that particular item, particular policy, procedures, form, etc., etc. So one audit, which anyway you're supposed to do it, may potentially give you two more assignments. Now, I have listed down certain anti-fraud controls. Minded, these are not exhaustive, but this gives you an indication of various anti-fraud controls that may be there. Some of them you would be in a position to audit, and some of them, I would say, in a way, they are not auditable. For example, external audit of financial statement. Somebody else is going to do the statutory audit, but you can't do it. But let's say a company has 10 subsidiaries. Then as part of your internal audit, you can ensure that all 10 subsidiaries are getting, they are getting audited. Nothing is left out. Code of conduct. According to me, this is one of the most important code of anti-fraud control. I have covered it exhaustively in subsequent slides. Internal audit department. Now, it is quite possible the company may have internal department, but at the same time, you as an external service provider are also doing the internal audit. Management certification of financial statements. Many companies depends on the internal audit to first audit the areas, the audit various say schedules, etc. And then they certify it. External audit of internal control of financial reporting. Many company outsource the internal content. Management review, hotline. Hotline is basically your ethics line, your tips line. Somebody who observes some fraud, then they can come and report that, hey, I have observed some fraud. Independent audit committee. Anti-fraud policy. If a company does not have any anti-fraud policies, maybe you can create one, that we don't encourage fraud, and if you observe some fraud, how to report it. Employee support programs. Now, certain Latin companies run this employee support programs. Basically, what it means that certain companies where the profile of their employees are such that they may be perennially under pressure. Maybe it is labor intensive industry. Maybe there are a lot of maybe outsourcing industry, contractor. So if there's some support program is there, maybe the risk of fraud is less. Employee training for employees, training for employees. You can provide training, company can provide training, fraud training for manager, executive, dedicated fraud department. So these are various anti-fraud controls. The last one, the rewards for whistleblower, which nowadays many regulators are experimenting with. Okay, should we reward whistleblowers or not? Some countries have also started rewarding the whistleblower. But if there is a reward, maybe you are creating a financial incentive for raising the whistle. Some more anti-fraud controls are segregation of duty, dual signatory to an approval, approval of senior where the beneficiary is a subordinate, which I call grandfather approval for grandson. Basically, let's say I as a manager, I have certain team members. So when I'm doing their appraisal, then I cannot decide the amount of their increment. So I would be only putting a proposal which my manager would be approving it. So basically, this is the when a manager is doing certain thing for the benefit of his reporting team, then he or she is not allowed to exercise the transaction in entirety. He or she need to take compulsory approval of his own manager. And yearly affirmation to code of conduct, conflict of interest. It's not one-time thing. It is an annual thing. And the more appropriate, more specific your code of conduct, conflict of interest is there, the better would be the result. So the question is, how do internal audit detect and deter fraud? So from this section, I'm going to cover this. The first thing is, this cycle, plan, do, check, act. Do you find it familiar? Of course, you will find it familiar because it is part of our CS syllabus. But at the same time, a large number of our clients are also ISO 9001 certified, which also contain the same thing, plan, do, check, act. So the fraud detection and deterrence cycle is basically plan that you do a risk assessment, including fraud risk, which you have to do it because if you don't do it, then if fraud happens, then they can ask where are the internal auditors, and you can also be held professionally negligible. And so once you do the risk assessment, you can come to know whether the fraud controls exist, does not exist, or it exists, there's some design gap. So if those don't exist, those are anyway gap. But even where there's some controls exist, you need to check the existence and effectiveness of those controls. And then once you do that, maybe there will be some report which the management need to tell what are the corrective action they are taking it. Now the same cycle is there in your ISO 9001. The same cycle is also there in case your company is ISO 27001 certified. Those are ISO certified because this is the Deming quality cycle. It is basically present in almost anything which involves improvement. Now, this is an extract from the ACFE 2020 reports to the nation. So this report also cover India certain fraud, some 73 or 78 fraud reported to ACFE, and in which the median loss was 110,000 USD. So this gives you an idea that if you want to create, hey, what do I audit for my internal audit? And this tells you that there's various departments and these are various the fraud schemes. So let me just annotate for your benefit. These are the fraud schemes. So like say operation, there can be billing schemes. There's a cash stationery, cash in hand schemes, check and payment tampering, corruption. Yeah, so many things which can happen there. So this gives you a good idea. For example, all those reds are very high percent chances that those things are happening. Now, after me, there is a session on procurement to pay. Maybe my fellow speaker can give light on the purchasing, how the fraud can happen. But I think that this gives you a good indication. You can use as your, let's say, ready reckoner. Now, these are certain schemes, certain ideas, certain ways which I generally use in my risk assessment. First of all, the normal simple risk assessment. What are the risks in that particular process? And I also check whether this particular process, do they handle cash? The cashier, the person who collect cash, the people who collect cash from your customer, etc. And large volume. Whether there is a large volume, if there's a large volume, if somebody take out some small amount of money, then it can create a huge incentive that person. External interfaces. Now, if somebody is stealing externally, what do you mean by externally? That is, say, vendor, customer, all those are external interfaces. And if somebody is dealing with government, then that become a little more particular area where there is a chances of fraud / corruption is there. Then you can also create your own ready reckoner by studying if reports are available for your organization, then what are the past fraud which has happened in the organization, particular client. If it is, it is not there or it is not readily available, then you can definitely do a study for that industry in which your organization, that particular client organization works. All it requires a Google. Google, for example, automobile dealer fraud. It will tell you all the ways in which the automobile dealer fraud is happening on the automobile dealer and by the automobile dealer. It can tell you both the things. Small team sizes, small team sizes means lack of segregation of duty. If there is a lack of segregation of duty, one person has the ability to carry out end-to-end transaction, which is a huge risk. An unstable function. Number of, small companies, maybe small team sizes, the function may not be stable, company is not paying enough, or there is too much of pressure, people are leaving. If people are always leaving, if there are no people, no stability, it is quite possible that somebody use that excuse to commit certain fraud. Now from here, there are certain case studies I have taken So all this thing had happened in the normal course of internal audit, but all this case study also have the potential of fraud. Now this is a step towards prevention of that fraud. So once you identify such kind of scenarios, maybe you can, besides the the violation of internal control, lack of internal control, maybe you can also quantify what is the loss and present, sorry, quantify the loss which could have happened and present as if fraud hits your client, what is the amount of money they can lose. In the previous session, Deepji has commented that can you create 1 or 2 page summary of value added? So maybe you can add the loss prevented in that summary. For example, in this particular organization, it was a multi-geography organization, means it was present across multiple geography. And what used to happen, they used to procure, locally at various geography, various states, various city. The funny thing was there was no item master and there was no pricing guidelines and there is no approved vendor list. So let's assume your client is procuring some item from, let's say at 10 different locations and there is no pricing guidelines, no approved vendor and no, defined items, then anyone can purchase anything. So somebody can purchase, let's say, pen, for 10 rupees and for 100 rupees. Will you say the person who's purchased 100 rupee pen has committed a fraud, or it's a lack of internal control? You can also link it with the cost saving. If somebody is purchasing pen of 100 rupees, somebody is purchasing pen of 10 rupees, then there is a potential of 90 rupees fraud as a potential of 90 rupee cost saving. Now this is just an example. You guys are smart. You can just think of various clients, whether in case wherever there is a decentralized purchasing, is this the same scenario? If the same scenario, then you can either put all the amount which a company can save as cost saving, or you can put the entire amount which company can face loss because of fraud. And how to overcome this thing? So it's very simple, that they need to have some approved vendor list, which is, let's say, centrally approved. They need to have approved price list. Now it is quite possible you may not be able to zero down a specific price. For example, let's say 11 rupees for a pen, but you can definitely say, okay, the price of a pen should be 10 to 11 rupees. And wherever the price of the pen exceed 11 rupees, they need to consult the central office. You can have item master